gorgeous. Okay. Welcome.
I saw
that. Welcome everybody to our second class in our life skill series. We would like to say a huge thank you and introduce our speaker for tonight. She'll be speaking about pelvic floor health, and her name is Malka Schwartz. She is a core and pelvic health movement specialist, certified Restore Your Core teacher, yoga teacher, and a birth doula. So thank you very much, and welcome.
Hi. Good evening. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm going to talk to you about the core and pelvic floor because it's a really, really mysterious part of our body. Because we can't see it, it kind of makes it this big unknown. Also, the fact that it's in such a private area, for a lot of people, perhaps it wasn't discussed much growing up, or they're scared to ask questions about it. I want you all to feel free, if you have any questions, to feel free to speak up. I'm very happy to answer them. Obviously, if you need something more in depth, I'm glad to get into more detail after the talk.
So if you can repeat the question,
okay.
So that
all right. Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Awesome. So what is the pelvic floor? So in our body, we have a pelvis, and this is what that pelvis looks like. Hope you can see it up there. And basically, what you have is you have your pubic arch, or commonly referred to as your pubic bone, the symphysis pubis right here. You have these frontal hip bones. They're known as the ASIS, and I'm going to quiz you on it later, so I hope you've written it. I'm kidding. It's the anterior superior iliac spine. So if you were to feel in the front of your hips right here, you would find these prominent bones. And in the back over here, we have the sacrum. The sacrum is, you have in the spine, right, all these smaller bones, but once we get to the sacrum, these bones are fused together. And then on the bottom of that, you have the coccyx, or the tailbone, and that can actually move. So this would be the main parts of the bony pelvis. And on the bottom portion here, we have what are known as the sits bone, or the ischial tuberosities. So these are what we actually want to be sitting on throughout the day. Connected to all of these bones, we actually have 16 muscles in 3 layers. So first of all, there's on the wall posters. So if you would like to look at any point, you're more than welcome to. But I'm also happy to pass the pelvis around. So if you want to look at it a little closer and explore it, you're more than welcome to do that. So this is just the bottom. So your pubic bone, it would be right over here, and your ASIS are right over here. So these muscles come together. It kind of forms this bowl shape at the bottom. So you can feel it. So you can go right now. You can put your hands on your ASIS, your frontal hip bones, and your pubic bone is a little further down, about where the pubic here is starting there. Yeah. So connected to all these parts you can see more on the bottom. You can see right in the pubic area where the muscles connect from over here all the way to the coccyx and into the sacrum. Right, we have from the sit bone to the sacrum, we have from the sacrum all the way coming forward to this pubic area. So there's a whole bunch of muscles crisscrossing. Most people don't even realize we have so many muscles in this area. And what these muscles do is they kind of coordinate together. And they have several really, really important jobs. One of the jobs is to support our pelvic organs. So I'm going to show up this model here. This model, we see our bladder, our uterus, and our rectum. So these muscles are there to help support and protect our pelvic organs. The other thing it does is it's almost like this shock absorber, and that's co-connected with that support. So when you're walking, for example, right, and there's some buoyancy and we're, taking steps, the first thing that's going to get hit after our legs is our pelvic floor. So we want our pelvic floor muscles to be functional to be able to support those organs properly. The other part that this connects into is continence. So how those organs are working to help us urinate and defecate as we need to. When there's a discoordination, either of the muscles or the sphincters, so we have these, think of it as a tiny band of muscles on the bottom of the bladder, right? And on the bottom of the rectum, we have internally and externally, and they kind of close it off, right? Because when we don't want to pee, we want to be able to hold it in, but then when we want to pee, we need those muscles to let go so that our bladder can empty. And it's really important that these organs function well and the muscles function together with those organs to help them work the way they should. The other way these muscles come into play is when it comes to intimacy, right? So part of intimacy, the muscles need to relax to make way for intimacy. And as well as when we orgasm. So when that happens, the muscles need to relax and contract. And that really helps a lot with that. It can help also with reproductive health, right? With pregnancy, all these muscles. So I'm gonna pass this around actually. These are all of the pelvic floor muscles. So you can kind of look in there. There's 16 muscles surrounding those organs.
So this is this, okay?
So the way our pelvis is actually like this. So it's not like this.
Oh.
It's more like this.
Like this.
Yes. I'm not quite as much, but yes.
Okay.
Great. So the way you kind of know how it's set up is if you look at the pubic arch here and you look at the ASIS, they're in a neutral position. They're lined up. So if you were to put a piece of paper, this would be a neutral position. And then when we tuck the pelvis and the pubic bone comes further forward, you can see this is no longer aligned. And when we untuck, the pubic bone moves further back. So, right, but you should have that capability to do that without leaning your body forward back. So I'm tucking and untucking my pelvis right now without moving anything else. Yoga, functional movement, so many ways that this manifests in day-to-day life. When we're walking, when we're picking up items. So the pelvis plays a really important role in all of what I just said. So let me just make sure, right? Support for organs, intimacy, bowel and bladder function, and it's a shock absorber. So when we're looking at the pelvic floor muscles, they don't work alone. So we like to isolate things and be like, it's this one thing. But actually, what we have in our body is really, really intelligent and brilliant. And we have systems that work together to help the pelvic floor function the way it should. So if you notice here, right, we have the leg, for example, right? We have muscles that connect from the thigh bone up into the pelvis as well. We actually have over 40 muscles that connect into the pelvis. So that's a lot of muscles that are helping to stabilize. And the pelvis itself is an inherently stable structure. It's when there's something off with it that it's less stable. So what the other part of this system is actually our core and our diaphragm or breathing system. So what you have is you have your abdominal muscles. There's a set of muscles and they're comprised of the transverse abdominals. So again, I'm going to quiz you later, so I hope you're paying attention. They wrap from your spine all the way around center. Okay, we often refer to them as corseting muscles or like a corset because they wrap around like that. Then we have our obliques, and we have two sets of them. Some connect from in here and kind of wraps around, and from your back coming forward. And then on top, we also have our rectus abdominis. So those are those six-pack muscles. Those are the ones people are most familiar with. So how does this all work together as a system? And why is that important for your pelvic floor function? So what happens is that your diaphragm is at the top, right underneath your ribs. So what happens is when you inhale, the diaphragm, which is a dome shape, and you can think of it like a jellyfish, it has to move out of the way so that the lungs can expand and the ribs can expand. So what happens is when you inhale, this dome shape, so you know how the jellyfish moves? So you can imagine the diaphragm moving much in the same way. So when you inhale, on top here, this descends down. And if you notice, what ends up happening is that the abdominal contents descend a little as well, and the pelvic floor muscles relax. Then when you exhale, the pelvic floor muscles lift, the abdominal contents lift, and the diaphragm lifts. And it's a beautiful system that works together to help support our body. Our core and our pelvic floor, which by the way, part of our core is also our back muscles. Well, it's another conversation. There's a lot of aspects to this. We're going to simplify it for tonight, even if it doesn't seem that way just yet. But basically, this is a pressurized system, and these muscles are coordinating together to make sure that we feel stable, we feel balanced, we feel strong, and that these muscles are supporting our organs. What we start to see is when there's a discoordination in that system, we'll start to see different dysfunction showing up. So let me just talk for a moment about muscles in general. The strength of muscles is determined by its ability to generate force, right? What does that mean really? So what is a strong muscle? So if you think of a slingshot, right? If you have a band on a slingshot that's functioning well, if you were to put an object in, right, it would generate amazing force to get that object to as far as you'd like it to go. But when we have muscles where, let's say the band is really rigid and tight and there's no mobility there, our object's not going to get very far at all. And then if you have a band that's super lax, it's also not going to get your object very far. So when we want strong functional muscles, we want muscles that have strength, right? They have some tone to them, but they also have elasticity. So if you wanted strong biceps, this is a classic example, right? You're not going to walk around all day like this. A lot of people confuse tight with strong. Tight is not strong, right? Tight is just one end of the spectrum. To have strong muscles can contract in multiple ways. So there's eccentric. So eccentric is I'm slowly lengthening my muscle fibers, but while I'm adding load, because I can do that passively and not feel much, right? So I'm lengthening my muscle fibers. There's concentric, where I'm shortening the muscle fibers, right? And then there's isometric. I'm not necessarily changing the length, but I'm loading those muscle fibers to hold whatever it is I need to hold. So healthy muscles can go through these different ranges, and the same thing applies to the pelvic floor. So when we want strong muscles, we want to take them through all these different ranges so that they can function optimally. So, right? So what is a strong muscle? A muscle that is pliable, right? But can tense as well. So tension isn't bad within itself. It's when we have excessive tension or complete lack of tension all the time. No matter what we're trying to do, that's when we'll start to see issues. So how does this come into play with our core and our pelvic floor? So like I showed you a moment ago, there's this pressure system that's within our abdominal cavity. And in order for that system to work well, our muscles need to be able to expand and our muscles need to be able to contract. What we want with the pelvic floor is for continence, right? Like I said, when we need to go to the bathroom, we need to be able to relax those muscles. And sometimes we'll see issues like constipation where we're like, oh my gosh, I can't go. And for some people, like instead of relaxing their muscles, they're like tensing them because they're so frustrated, and it just leads to this whole cycle. So we need to really make sure those muscles are functioning well. When we have really tight muscles that don't have elasticity, sometimes we'll start to see problems in areas such as intimacy. So we might have people who are having pain with intercourse. We might have people who don't have the ability to orgasm because the muscle's so tight here that before it can contract, it actually needs to let go, right? Because remember, we need to be able to let go in order to be able to come back in. And the same thing with being able to hold in gas. We should have that capability. I'm not talking about when you want to get it out of your system because it's bothering you. I'm talking about having the capability to go when you need to go, when you want to go. And also for those muscles to support our pelvic organs, they also need to be able to contract and relax. So what we see is sometimes when the muscles, for whatever reason, have a discoordination with that, sometimes our organs can shift out of their original place. So what happens is a lot of people have no clue about anything what I'm talking about. And then they go and they get married, and maybe they have an issue with intimacy. Maybe they go to give birth and they have a really difficult birth, or suddenly after they give birth, their abdominals feel different, their pelvic floor feels different, and they have no clue what's going on with their body. So we really need to start to learn and understand, well, what are these parts of our body that are so hidden that we don't talk about, that we don't know about, and what can we do about that? So the biggest thing you can do for yourself is you're here. So you're already educating yourself. You've already come to learn more about this part of your body. And then what you can do is start to see, how can I integrate that understanding of this system in day-to-day life, so I don't get to a point where my muscles are dysfunctional, so I don't get to a point where I'm in pain. Or if that does come up for me, I know that that's not normal and I can go get help. Because sometimes when it comes to core and pelvic floor, we're told things are normal when perhaps it's common, right? So sometimes people, after they give birth, they're like, oh, I'm peeing myself. Oh, but that's normal because my friend's also peeing herself and my mom is peeing herself. So that's normal, right? And well, that may not be the way the body was designed to work. It doesn't mean that that's normal and that should be happening just because it's happening for other people. So I want you to have this information so that, again, should anything come up, you'll know that, hey, this is not the way it should be, and there's help out there, and I can go get help so I can hold my pee in when I need to, and I don't have to worry about sneezing or running and leaking pee, which some of you may have never heard about, but it's something that can happen. And the other thing I'd like to say about that is that we assume it happens just when we have kids, but I've actually had many clients who've had this, who've never had kids. I work with men as well who have issues. So when you're talking about sciatic pain, SI joint dysfunction, those are actually all related to the pelvic floor. When we're having lower back pain, that's a pelvic floor issue. Constipation, hemorrhoids, that's a pelvic floor issue, right? Pain with sex. So really heavy periods, right? Tons of cramping, that's actually a sign something is going on. We need to get that checked out. And we'll see that what happens in the pelvic floor muscles can affect fertility, can affect our period. And the great news is that there's wonderful, wonderful pelvic floor therapists out there who can really help us regain function if we're already in a place where we've lost that function. And I don't really necessarily love the term lost. I feel like sometimes your body takes a journey and it ends up where it ends up. And it doesn't mean you're broken. And it doesn't mean it's the end of the world. I have something called pelvic organ prolapse. So what that means is that my uterus has shifted out of its place. So you can see over here, right, that bladder, that uterus, and that rectum. And sometimes when these muscles aren't coordinating well, or when the ligaments are really lax, those organs can shift out of place. So for me, I have something known as uterine prolapse. And what that means is my uterus has shifted out of its place and my cervix has dropped really low in my body. So I'm incredibly lucky that I had an amazing, amazing midwife, Kristen Leonard, who's phenomenal. And she actually checked me for it. And this was 11 years ago. And yeah, she's absolutely amazing. So she actually checked and diagnosed me. I likely had this for years before I had kids, but had zero awareness of it. So after I gave birth, she assessed me and she said, hey, you have pelvic organ prolapse. And I was like, well, what is that? And I was a birth doula then already. I was a birth doula before I had kids. So it was something so foreign to me. And at the time I went to try to find information, nothing. So back then there was nothing on the internet on it. It was like, this happens to old people and people who've had a ton of kids. Ha 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 ha, good luck. And so that was essentially all I found. And I would try to ask doctors and I would ask around, couldn't find information on it. Fast forward to today, you have so many groups, so many people are like, oh, I have that too. This is my experience. And what I find a lot of is when it comes up, because people haven't heard of it, they get so scared because they don't understand what's happening in their body. They're like, oh, I feel this heaviness. I'm having issues peeing. I'm experiencing something protruding when I have my period and I don't know what's going on. And a lot of people think like, that's it. They're broken. It's the end of the road for them. Like life is not going to get better from here. So the good thing about my journey is because there was no information in the beginning, I didn't have any of preconceived notions that I was doomed. And sometimes we'll go out and research can be amazing, but sometimes it can also scare us. So for me, I knew, wait, there's got to be more to this. There's got to be a way that I can heal my body. If my body somehow got here, I believe there's a way for me to heal myself. And for me, it led to this really long journey of research, of exploring things in my body and seeing, well, what can I do to manage this? And what I found is working on my posture, working on my alignment, understanding, right, the mechanics of how I'm breathing, right? So for me, I learned over time that I actually bear down a lot in my body. So this bearing down, constant bearing down, was putting a ton of pressure on my pelvic floor. So learning how to manage that, I was able to heal and I will start by saying that I was told that I couldn't heal more than a level of my prolapse, and I had a grade 3. And I actually healed to a grade 1. So I healed 2 levels. I was like, you're telling me I can't even heal 1. I'm telling you, I'm going to do better than that. And I did. So this is what kind of inspired me to do what I do now and to share this information. So hopefully you don't get to that point. And if you do, hey, wait, there's answers out there. There are things I can be doing. So what can we be doing as a preventative? Or again, if you're already experiencing some symptoms of dysfunction. So number 1, I want everyone to take a moment here and put your hands on your ribs. Yep. So right beneath your chest. And then I want you to just inhale and exhale. And I just want you to notice what you feel. Right? I'm not going to give you more instructions yet. Right? Notice, what are you feeling in your body? Are you feeling any movement under your fingers? No movement? Yeah. Right? So I want you to notice now, put one hand on your belly, one hand on your chest. And again, just breathe how you normally breathe. Notice, what are you feeling? I'm almost trying not to breathe so you don't see and cheat. Right? What are you feeling happening?
Stomach going out. I guess it feels like it's going from the stomach to the chest.
So do you remember what I said in the beginning about how we should be breathing? Right? So what happens? So some of you missed this. I know you came in later. When we inhale, that diaphragm at the top has to descend. So this is representative of our pressure system. We have the diaphragm, the abdominals, and the pelvic floor, and our back and our spine over here. So this pressure system, whenever you put pressure in one area, that pressure shifts to another area. So when there's excessive pressure in one area all the time, that's when sometimes it'll put a strain on muscles. It'll put that system out of balance. So when we want to get it in balance, we start with how we're breathing. So what I want you to do now is you're going to bring your hands back to those ribs, because remember that diaphragm has to descend down so the ribs can expand 3-dimensionally. So in order to do that, the ribs expand from front to back, side to side, and there's a little rise and fall to the chest. For most of us, it's easier to move forward, or some of us, it's easier that up and down. But for a lot of us, it's a little bit harder to do that side to side. So I want you to take a moment here and see, can you inhale and think of your ribs separating side to side on your inhale? And on your exhale, can you imagine the ribs softening down? Right, do that a few times. How does that feel? Breathing into the sides of your ribs and exhaling, letting the ribs soften down. Right, so what's happening here, right, is that perhaps the belly's moving a little bit. Some of you put your hands here, right, and you're like, oh, I'm feeling my belly move the whole time, right? So the belly, it's natural for it to move as part of that pressure system. But the question is the belly moving so much, but the ribs aren't moving much? And what that does is when our belly is doing all that work over time, first of all, we're not maximizing our inhale and our exhale, but also we have something known as the linea alba, and that is this connective tissue that runs down the center that our abdominal muscles connect into. So when we're breathing into our belly throughout the day, we're putting actually a lot of pressure on that connective tissue. And over time, that can weaken that connective tissue. And then let's say we get pregnant, and now we have a baby growing in there, and we still have this pattern there, we're adding even more pressure. And sometimes what that can lead to is the weakening of this linea alba can contribute to the muscle separating. Now, there's studies that show 100% of women, the muscles separate when you're pregnant because we have to make space for baby. The question is, how much are they separating? And are those muscles coming back together after you give birth? And really that has to do with the integrity of this connective tissue, right? So we want it to have a little bit of pliability, so it moves without too much resistance, but not so much that it's thinning out excessively and it's really leading to this weakness in our abdomen. So ideally, we don't want to be excessively breathing into our belly, but it's okay if the belly moves when we breathe. So when you inhale, it starts with the ribs and the belly perhaps is moving as an afterthought, but it's not driving that movement. So now I want you to take a moment. And what you learned the opposite?
Yeah, like you need to breathe in through your stomach and then
when
voice.
okay.
And if you breathe in through your stomach, like versus any other part, like chest or whatever, then it gives your voice that whole power.
Okay.
So I've always been like practicing.
Right. So the question was about, just for those who are online, about breathing into the belly when it comes to voice, because it can give more power. So there's actually this concept with really utilizing the transverse abdominals. So the transverse abdominals are, again, those corset muscles, and they're the deepermost abdominal muscles. So for some people, they feel that if you're expanding here, you're letting go fully, you'll get a deeper contraction. What I would like to point out is that there are things that take place in every day-to-day life and as we're doing things, and sometimes there's a time and place for other modalities that might be appropriate. My question would be is, are you able to get that same depth, that same note without this full belly expansion? Like explore and see, right? And see functionally, like, is it possible? Because if it's possible, maybe we can change that strategy a little. And my other thing would be, how often are you doing it? Because if you're doing it every so often, it's not the end of the world. If you're doing this all day for hours at a time, that's when there's more of a concern. So our bodies are really intelligent. We're designed that we have different ways to breathe for a reason, because if one route isn't working well, like we need another route or we wouldn't be alive, right? So our body's going to try to do whatever it can do so that we can function. So variation in that is okay. It's normal. It's healthy. The question would be, is that what you're always doing?
So what's the best way to breathe for optimal like relaxation?
So that's all, right. So okay, you're bringing up an excellent point.
That's what I hear more than anything.
Right.
Being like a relaxed.
Right.
That's
So
what usually like yoga teachers or
I know.
Pilates do, so you like breathe through your stuff.
Yeah.
Right. So that is a common thing that comes up. I'm just repeating this for those of you who are online. Breathing into the belly to relax, especially when yoga teachers and Pilates teachers bring that up. So there is a time and place for everything. If you are really stressed out and you've had a bad day and you need to calm down, right? So we have this vagus nerve internally. And when we breathe into that belly, it can calm us down and it can calm our nervous system down. So if that's a strategy you want to use every so often to calm the body, that's okay. But it should not be the go-to strategy throughout the day.
So what's the
So the go-to strategy is this exact strategy that we're talking about. This rib breath, three-dimensional, front to back, side to side. The exhale, the softening, right? So what happens is, if whatever pattern you have, and if you've had it for 20 years or 30 years or 15 years or however many years you've had that pattern, we're not going to change it overnight. It's going to be too overwhelming. You're not going to remember all day. Okay. No. Yes.
Can you deep breathe that way?
You can breathe deeply that way. But the truth is, you don't need to be breathing so deeply throughout the day. Sometimes also when we're first learning something, we're doing this exaggerated version. But don't walk around, right? Don't walk around all day. Exactly. So sometimes initially we do that deeper breath. Just what it is we're retraining our brain, because our brain is responsible, and it's gonna be the one deciding how we're breathing throughout the day. So we want to retrain the brain. So right now, right, maybe we did that more exaggerated, but what should happen is over time, instead of this, right, we're gonna do very subtle version. It's the same movement, but now, I am exaggerating the breath a little bit so you can hear, but not as exaggerated. Again, so here's the question: what is training versus exercising versus implementing into every day, right? Exercises, sometimes you go to the gym, you do squats a few times, and that's it. You leave it at the gym and you're not squatting the rest of the week. Training, when we're training our muscles and our breathing, we're trying to repattern the way the muscles are moving, the way they're working together, right? What the relationship is with whether it's the organs, the muscles, the bones, everything around it. So we're trying to change the way they're functioning as a unit. So when it comes to things like this, what I would say is if you notice just now, like, oh my gosh, I could not breathe into the sides of my ribs, or this feels odd to me, you start off by just practicing for a minute a day, right? Maybe then a few minutes a day. And it can take time to integrate. Some people start practicing this way and like they instantly get it and yay, beautiful. I've been doing this for several years. I've been able to do this breath for a long time. But when I would get out of breath, I would default to my old pattern. This summer was the first time that I caught myself out of breath and doing more the side to side, even though it was deep. And I've been doing it for several years, and I've been teaching it for several years. So that's how long it took my body. Now, for other things, my body got like this, no problem. For me, that was just something that was so huge in my body that it took a while to reprogram. So I would say, don't worry about reprogramming overnight. It's not the way our body works. But when you catch yourself like breathing another way, or you're out of breath, say, hey, what happens if I take a moment and breathe into the side? Maybe I can set aside a few minutes every day. So moving forward, right? So we have, yeah, sure.
Should you, so if you're doing like the yoga or whatever, like exercising, should you go to the breathing of the stomach, or should you try to?
No. The only time if you're trying to relax, right? Maybe again,
yoga, I'm saying, yoga.
Well, so yoga is, there's multiple types. We have vinyasa, which is really fast-paced, stripping sweat. We have hatha, which can be really intense, but really slow, right? We have restorative, which is really gentle, right? So in a restorative class, that might be a time that someone's utilizing the breath. But again, usually you're not utilizing the breath the whole class. So I would say if you need to take a few minutes to do it, great. If you find multiple times during the class you need to do it, great. But in a faster paced class, it would not be the ideal way to really oxygenate the body. So you would want to get a little bit more of an optimal strategy there. So we have, right? Okay, getting back. We know that we have that breath down pat. But now what happens when we shift the position of the pelvis? How does that affect our core and our pelvic floor? So as you see over here, right? I said earlier, these bones can move, right? So this actually, I didn't say this earlier, but the sacrum does something called nutation and counter nutation, right? I didn't necessarily demonstrate that in the order that I said it. But basically this can move back and forward, right? This tailbone can, right? It can move. It has the ability to move, but also the top, right? The ilium are able to move, and also the sit bones are able to move. Now, this pelvis is an exaggeration. It's not moving that much because we have muscles, but the position of our pelvis is going to affect those pelvic floor muscles. So if you're a person, right? So remember how we said neutral, the ASIS or frontal hip bone and the pubic arch are aligned? Well, if you see in this position, this area is kind of open, right? So our muscles are now having the opportunity throughout the day to support us, to work, because there's gravity. So they have to work to support the organs. But the second we start to tuck the pelvis, which a lot of us will end up in this tucked position, we might end up rounded, and don't worry, suddenly everyone's straightening up in their seats, right? Suddenly, first of all, sometimes our organs are resting more on that sacrum. So now our pelvic floor muscles are like, great, we get to go on vacation. We don't have to work so hard. But what can also happen is sometimes our sacrum, my toe bone's turning around there, sometimes it gets compressed. And remember, you have all those muscle attachments. So what's going to happen when this is compressed here and we're constantly in this position, those muscles can kind of end up in this shortened, tighter state. And they might sometimes start to get a little lazy because, hey, I don't have to move, so why should I? And what that might do is that might disrupt this whole system. Because now when you're inhaling, those muscles are not expanding fully the way they should, right? So I want you to take a moment and I want you to see, can you sit on your sit bone? So if you imagine your pubic bone and your ASIS in this line, so take a moment, can you tuck, right? Sit on the back on that sacrum. You might have to round your spine to do that, right? And then do the opposite. Can you think of your pubic bone moving down to the floor, creating a big arch? So we're exaggerating right now, right? So can you do that a few times? Can you rock back and forth on your chair? And what you want to eventually find is these bony prominences, right? And this is actually where we want to be sitting on, right? So we don't want to be sitting here. We want to be sitting here, but we're also not looking to go too far forward. So now right? So if you need to, you can find this in-between place from this tuck and untuck, trying to sit on those sit bones. Imagine your spine nice and tall. So now I want you to take a nice inhale into those ribs and exhale. What? Right? But what I want you to now do is close your eyes for a moment, right? And if you don't feel this, that's okay. It's so subtle, it can be really hard to feel at first. You're going to inhale into those ribs. And I want you to imagine your pelvic, your abdominal organs very gently lowering a little bit. I want you to imagine your pelvic floor relaxing. And then I want you on the exhale, can you imagine it's very gentle. We're not squeezing. We're not doing a Kegel. We're not contracting the muscle. Just imagine it gently coming back. Imagine your abdominal contents lifting. Your ribs are softening. The air is being propelled out of your body. Right, try that a few times. See how it feels here. Inhale. Imagine this natural, very soft descent. We're not bearing down. We're not forcing down. Exhaling, we're imagining just everything coming back up into its original place. And do that a few times. Notice, how does that feel for your body? Right? And then I want you to now go and I want you to tuck your pelvis. I want you to round your back, right? And I want you to try to do that same breath. First of all, notice if you feel restriction in your ribs. Notice what you're feeling in your belly. And notice what you're feeling in your bottom. Okay? Right? So just taking a second to understand that difference. Now let's see if we can layer on a little bit more, right? Can we connect to our pelvic floor? So I want you to imagine your pelvic floor muscles. So for those of you who missed it, we have 16 muscles in our pelvic floor. They connect from front to back and side to side. Some are crisscrossing over here. So I want you to imagine all these muscles. And I want you to imagine that from front to back, it's like elevator doors. And you're gonna go ahead on your exhale. So remember, on the exhale, everything kind of comes in and up again. So that's when we would wanna contract our pelvic floor. So now I'm moving on from just regular day-to-day breathing to how we can connect with our pelvic floor. So you're gonna think of these muscles like an elevator door closing and lifting up towards your navel. So you go ahead, take a moment, take a nice inhale and make sure you're in that neutral spine again.
The elevator is lifting though?
Yes. So it's elevator doors here. This is what we're gonna start with and then we're gonna add on to it. So the doors are closing and lifting up. So you're gonna go ahead, take a nice inhale and your body's not gonna move. Just, you're gonna imagine your pelvic floor coming center and lifting up. Right? And then you're gonna see, can you inhale, can you relax that down, right? And no one's gonna know whether you're doing it or not, right? Only you can tell if this is easy for you or hard for you. Then you're gonna go ahead, imagine side to side. Same thing, imagine them as elevator doors, closing and starting to lift up, 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 up. And slowly let it down. So don't like lift up and just go flat, right? Now can you imagine front to back, side to side. You can even think of diagonally, everything coming in and lifting up, 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 up. And can you go ahead, relax it down on your inhale. Right, so now what I want you to do is I want you to imagine there's a blueberry right in the center. And you don't want to crush the blueberry, right? You want to be a little bit more gentle, but firm enough that you can lift it up. Front to back, side to side, everything's going to surround that blueberry. And on your exhale, you're going to slowly bring it together, lift it up. But you're not going to just drop it or you're going to squish the blueberry. So you're going to very, very gently, slowly come down, slowly let the tissue fan out. Try that again. You're going to exhale, draw everything in and up. Right. And I want you to notice, are you having a hard time connecting to this part of your body? Right? Does it feel harder for you to try to contract and lift up? Does it feel harder for you to try to relax and let down? Right? Where is your starting position? Yes.
I'm having a hard time because if I'm lifting up, I would be thinking that I would be inhaling.
Right. So very often, for whatever reason, there's been some sort of discoordination with how we're breathing and how we're contracting our muscles. And I deal with this a lot in my practice and with my clients. We'll see that discoordination of the muscles and the breathing. So we're gonna try to retrain that. So in the beginning, if you're having that, it might be difficult. What you're gonna do is you're gonna just do it one piece at a time and taking a moment to really try to connect and see, even though this is hard for me, can I try it? And you imagine yourself doing it, even if you don't feel it happening. And then I love to use the word imagine because if we don't actually feel it, how our brain works is that we create pathways from the brain to different body parts. And sometimes some of those pathways weaken, but we can create those pathways as well. The example I love to give is when I was little, my sister used to be able to raise, I mean, she still can raise one eyebrow. And I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And I asked her, oh my gosh, how can I do that? Teach me how to do that. So she said, go stand in front of a mirror every single day. Just try to do it. And one day it's just going to happen. I'm like, okay. So I went in front of that mirror. Nothing happened. Went there another day. Nothing happened. Day after day. And like one day, right? All I did was I stood there and just thought about doing it and imagined doing it. And one day I was able to get it. So that happens a lot with the body because it's a brain connecting with that ear. I have it all the time with clients with spreading the toes. They're like, I can't do it. And I'm like, let's take a moment now. We're going to pause what we're doing. We're going to focus. And I think every single client that we've done it, some had to spend 5 minutes doing it, but after focusing, they were able to do it. I don't want you to spend that much time. I don't want you to get overwhelmed, but it takes time for the brain to connect with parts. And there's different ways to do it. That's why we have something called biofeedback, where we give feedback to those muscles. That's why sometimes we can have a pelvic floor therapist, right, who might need to do internal work to get us to connect with those muscles, right? They also have machines that can do that. What I love to do is, I couldn't do it here today. There's a lot of us, but when I do workshops or when I have classes, I will have balls or I will have a pool noodle and I'll have clients sit on it, or I'll have them take their hands and just put their hand there externally. And you can do that at home in the privacy of your home. Because sometimes when we have something that our muscles are against, it gives our brain feedback. So even though it's the external muscles, right? Like it brings our brain's awareness to that area. And it can make it a little bit easier to connect with that area. So the last visualization I'm going to do with you today, with that same pelvic floor contraction.
Sorry, would you be able to remind us like what those steps were?
Yeah, of course. I'm going to walk you through it.
All right, good.
Awesome.
I want to like write it down and practice it.
Yeah.
Because it just sounds so abstract. Like it's hard. The elevator, I don't know. I got lost there.
Yeah. No. So
Like, I don't know where.
so that's why I'm giving different cues. That's why I did the elevator,
Okay.
right? We did the blueberry.
Okay.
Now we're going to imagine we have a piece of silk
But I
cloth.
still don't get weird. Like exactly it is in my body. That it's.
I'm like ready to hike up my skirt.
That's I
Like, I will show you.
It's so abstract. It's like hard to-
So here's your pelvis,
Okay.
right? So it's literally right over here. From here, from front to back, side to side, internally.
Okay.
Right? So let me see if there's a picture there. Can you see on the wall? There's also over there as well. So actually, I think that one over there is a better visual of all your pelvic floor muscles. Right? So, yeah. Yep. So it gives you a better visual.
By the way, can it ever get ripped out of your body?
There's actually something called levator ani avulsion. It's more rare. It's very rare for that to happen, but it is
Like,
possible.
If I feel weak in the area, like,
Yes.
does that, I don't know, like I'm asking, does it, like I feel very weak, like am I imagining that, oh my gosh, it's gonna fall out, or like it's sewed in so tight?
No. So it's not usual. So did you hear me talk about the pelvic organ prolapse?
Could be, you mentioned a point.
Okay, so pelvic organ prolapse is when our organs shift out of place and we can feel this heaviness in the vagina. And it might feel, for some people, that's how they describe it. Or they might feel weakness, or overall weakness, tired, can't carry things, or they get pain easily.
Not walk so like fast, you know?
Right.
I used to be able to walk like a block in 30 seconds.
Right, and part of that can be endurance, right? Cardio, but it can also be weakness of the muscles. So sometimes we have to look at the full picture. So this is one component of it, but there's layers, there's elements to the pelvic floor and how it connects. So actually, that's the fact you said that is actually, I want to take a quick moment, right? So sometimes we have a hard time connecting to our pelvic floor, and sometimes we have a hard time connecting to our core. And sometimes we're spending so much time focusing. So if you imagine these are the pelvic floor muscles, right? And now let's say we're feeling the pelvic floor muscles lengthen and shorten, right? And then we're not feeling them anymore. But what did I just do just now? I slackened my hands, right? So the structure where the muscles are attaching to are now weaker, right? So let's say our hips are weak or our glutes are weak. That is going to impact our pelvic floor. So when we are trying to address the pelvic floor, we actually need to look at the body as a whole. So the same thing with our ribs and our pelvis, right? They are connected via the spine, but they're also connected via muscles. So the position of your pelvis to your ribs is going to affect those muscles and how they're functioning. So I'll give you an example on my body. I, for many years, was here, right? So I had a ton of downward pressure, could not connect with my lower abdominals, had that pelvic organ prolapse where it was really low. And I was like, oh my God, I can't connect to my lower belly. And I'm always breathing like this. So for me, part of that rehabilitative work to get my pelvic floor and my core to function better was realigning where my ribs were in relation to my pelvis. My pelvis, so a lot of people, their pelvis likes to tuck. Mine is the opposite. Mine likes to untuck. So I'd have this like banana back where I'm like arching excessively, chest is reaching forward. I have something called hypermobility. So I go a little bit, I have really big range of movement in my joints. So my knees would go really far back. I can pop down into split on the floor right now, no problem. That was my body, right? So for me, what I had to do to work on my pelvic floor issue was actually work on my whole body. My feet naturally overpronate. What that means is my arches collapse. I have those flat feet. I had to work on my feet in order to address my pelvic floor. So we have to look at structures as a whole and see, well, you know, how many of you know somebody who like they have lower back pain and they put an orthotic in their shoe and they're magically feeling better, right? A lot of you have heard that, or you know someone, or you are that someone. It's the same thing here. When we want our core and pelvic floor to function, we need to make sure the rest of the body's functioning, right? It's like a set of dominoes. You set one off, the rest are going to go off. Something's off, you know, Jenga, you remove certain blocks and all of a sudden the rest of the tower is coming down. So the same thing with the body. So yes, we need to address how are we using the pelvic floor? How are we using the core? So what I don't want you to be doing is going around all day. Ooh, let me contract my pelvic floor all day. So actually, let's take a second now to see, can we connect with our core? So what should your abdominal muscles be doing to support you? When you exhale, I mentioned, right, everything comes back in and up. So actually, your abdominal muscles should be pulling inward, right? So you remember that corset? So if you imagine you had a corset around you when you exhale, if someone were to be pulling like the strings of that corset, these muscles would be coming center and your muscles would be pulling inward, okay? So I want you to now get back into that neutral position, right? So make sure you're not tucked and rounded, you're not arching excessively. We're gonna soften the ribs, soften the shoulders. You're gonna take a nice inhale in. Can you exhale nice and slow? Start to draw the lower belly in and slightly upward, right? And maybe you feel it, maybe you don't, right? Not all of us are gonna feel it when we're sitting down. Here is where you said about the breath comes into play, right? So when we utilize our diaphragm, when we start to add in vocalization, we can actually access our core a little bit better. So in Restore Your Core, I am a certified Restore Your Core teacher. One of the techniques we use, it's called candles, and we use this hiss or this shush. And what it sounds like is this, or shh. What that does is it creates these vibrations. It gets those core muscles to like, it affects the pressure in here. And it gets that pressure to move a little bit more upward, and it gets those abdominal muscles to contract even better. So even if it sounds funny, you're gonna go ahead, you're gonna take a moment, you're gonna inhale, relax the belly, expand the ribs, exhale, draw that lower belly in. Can you get your lower abdominal muscle to start to pull in? Inhale, let it go, right? I'm gonna try a different cue with you. So if you had a hard time feeling that, I want you to imagine from frontal hip bone to frontal hip bone, you're not gonna actually move them closer to each other, but you're gonna imagine there's a string between them and you're gonna pull the sides closer together and inward. See if that cue works for your body. In the front. So you're gonna imagine these frontal hip bones. You're gonna exhale, shh, imagine them pulling in towards each other, but really it's gonna be those muscles and pulling in, right? So we're trying to get the lower abdominals. Most people can actually get their upper abs pretty easily, but we're trying to get those lower abdominals to come in. So let's try that again. Inhale in, exhale, shh. Fantastic. So when we do that correctly, and we imagine actually this upward action, our pelvic floor should actually co-contract with our core. So your abdominal muscles actually connect down into the pelvis here. So very often what your abdominal muscles are doing are affecting what your pelvic floor muscles are doing. So our pelvic floor muscles should actually kind of co-activate with the core. So yes, you can start a contraction from your pelvic floor, do a pelvic floor contraction, but you can also contract your core, and if you're doing it correctly, your pelvic floor will come along for the ride. And if we're doing that correctly, then throughout the day, we're actually working our core and our pelvic floor. So when you're walking around, you're not gonna be walking around, okay, let me go like keep it contracted all the time. Because remember what I said earlier, right? Too much tension is not good for the body. If you want strong arms, you're gonna be like, all right, I'm gonna walk around all day like this. Absolutely not. You're gonna get really, really tense because there's gonna be too much tension. You're gonna get tight, it's gonna be painful. So you need to make sure you're letting go so that when you need to use your arms, you're able to use them. What you also want to happen is that eventually it should become natural. You shouldn't have to think about how your core is drawing in, because what happens for a lot of people is instead of their core drawing in, they bulge it out, they bear down into the bottom, or they just brace it. So they just like harden it. And what that does to that pressure is it can just make that pressure go up or down too much. So that's an okay strategy once in a blue moon when you really need it. You know, you hear these stories, this mom needed to lift this really heavy thing for blah, blah, blah. Great, that needs to happen then. But it shouldn't be the day-to-day strategy. What we want to happen is eventually that drawing in of the muscles should be automatic. The same way you go to open your door, you don't have to think about your arm muscle. Okay, all right. Like you don't have to do that. You don't have to think about it. So it should be eventually automatic, and it should be tension to task. So how much your muscles are working according to the test you're doing. If you're picking up a tissue from the floor, you don't need that much strength to do that. If you're picking up a 20-pound child, you're gonna need more strength in your core and in your body to support that and to support your organs. So I now want to do an experiment with you and how the position of our pelvic floor and the tension in our body can affect our ability to contract and relax. So first come into your neutral position. Take a nice inhale into the sides of those ribs, belly's relaxed. Exhale, first do a pelvic floor contraction on its own, right? Think of the muscles all coming in center. You're gonna lift it up, 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 up. And then inhale, you're gonna relax it down slowly. Don't just drop it, nice and slow. Great, let's forget that we just did that. Can we think of starting from the core? So can you take a nice inhale in? Exhale, can you draw the lower belly in? But imagine this upward movement, and maybe you can feel the pelvic floor activating, but you're not starting it from the pelvic floor. Great, relax and let it go. Nice and slow. Right, now you're gonna go ahead, you're gonna tuck your pelvis. You're gonna hunch your shoulders, you're gonna squeeze your fists, you're gonna clench your jaw, you're gonna clench everything, and you're gonna try to lift the pelvic floor up from this position, right? So you're gonna try to lift everything up. More importantly, now I want you to try to relax your pelvic floor. Yeah, right? Let it go, right? So now, once again, come into that neutral position, relax your jaw, relax your shoulders, relax your chest. Take a moment to just breathe. Now, once again, try to do that contraction, just your pelvic floor. Everything coming in and up, but very gently. And just as importantly is that elongation and relaxing, right? And then try it with your core. Can you do that core drawing in and up? But can you also very gently let it go? Okay, and notice the difference between that and a moment ago when you were clenching and holding, right? So we want to be mindful throughout the day. What's happening in my body? And how are those things affecting my core and my pelvic floor, right? So when it comes to birth, what we need to happen is we need the pelvic floor to relax. When it comes to intimacy, we need the pelvic floor to relax. When it doesn't have that capability to relax, what we just felt, that just happens. We start to have pain. Actually, most people who have leaking of urine, a lot of people, they're like, oh, it's because my muscles are lax and they're too loose. But actually, we would say about 50% of people, it's because their muscles are too tight. And that combined with the pressure system, and they have a lot of pressure come from on top. They have a lot of pressure come from on bottom because there's a discoordination in that system. And it's like all of a sudden they're leaking urine. All of a sudden it's not holding in the way it should be. So there's multiple reasons why that might happen. But if we can be aware of, hey, I can correct my posture now before I have kids. Or even if you have kids already, you can start working, how can I work on my posture so that my muscles can get into a place where they can coordinate correctly, where they can contract well and they can release well. And know that it's okay if you sometimes tuck, if you sometimes round, right? Our body was created to move in all of these delicious ways for a reason. We're just not meant to get stuck in one position all of the time. So I want you to take a moment here to check into your body. Notice how your body's feeling. Noticing, where is your rib cage, right? Are your ribs thrusted forward? Are they collapsing down to the floor, right? Are you clenching your bottom? Are you tucking a ton? Are you untucking a ton, right? Maybe you're neutral. But I want you to take a moment to just become aware of your body. Become aware of it, where it's at, what it's feeling like, right? And seeing how that feels for you right now. Moment of silence. And I want you to start to notice, are you feeling tension anywhere in your body? And can you take a moment to imagine wherever you're feeling tension, can you imagine those muscles on your inhale expanding and relaxing? And you exhale, softening and melting. Right? Noticing that mind-body connection. Right? And this is where when we get into this calmer state, we can actually do so much to strengthen our body and to come to a better place of understanding our body, right? So when it comes to childbirth, for example, having a calm environment. When it comes to intimacy, having that calm environment, that soft environment, setting the tone can change that tension in the muscles. What we'll sometimes see is that when there's too much tightness in the muscles, or if there's too much laxity, babies can get into really funky positions. And this is important because in this community, a lot of people are having a lot of babies, and we want to have comfortable pregnancies. We want to have as comfortable as possible, because birth is birth, right? It's hard work, but we can try to make the experience as easy as we can possibly make it for ourselves. We can make the recovery better so that we feel stronger afterwards. So we feel like we can lift our babies. We can walk our kids to where they need to go, right? Without feeling pain, without feeling discomfort. So what needs to happen, I know we're running short on time. Do we have a few more minutes? Okay, awesome. So I just wanted to bring this up because first, a lot of you, either you're still in the childbearing years, or you're going to be hopefully in the near future, right? So taking everything we just learned, right? We learned a lot about our core and our pelvic floor. How does that translate? So what in labor and birth, what needs to happen is baby needs to come inside to the pelvis. So if you notice at the top of the pelvis, it's widest from side to side. So when baby first gets into the pelvis, they actually come usually a little bit more to the side, right? Then what happens is that this is known as the ischial spine. So some of you who've given birth, you might have heard them say something about station. Oh, baby's at -1, -2, +1, +2. And most people are like, what does that even mean? And what that means is where baby's head is in relation to the pelvis, right? So minus would be above the ischial spine right here. And anything below is +1, +2, +3, baby's born, +4, baby's born. So what happens is baby kind of comes in an angle, but then to get past this ischial spine, the baby's head has to turn now to make way this way. But then to get out of that last part, baby has to turn again, right? So usually when baby comes out, it's the back of their head, and then they rotate so that their shoulders can come out and the rest of their body can come out. What we sometimes see happening with pelvic floor dysfunction, and this is why it's really important to address it, is that there's a muscular imbalance. So you remember how I spoke about that tucking? So sometimes people, if they're excessively tucking, the muscles come more restricted. So sometimes baby's not descending down the way they should, right? Or it's taking a really, really long time. Or sometimes people, there's a discoordination with those muscles. Instead of relaxing them, they're contracting them. And they're like, I don't know why. I'm trying to push, but like I'm not getting anywhere, right? Or maybe they're pushing for a really long time. We want to make sure these muscles are well balanced. So what it starts with is that breath. It starts with that coordination of how your core is engaging, So when your core is super relaxed, what we'll sometimes see is what needs to happen is when baby comes in. So do you see how the baby's head is here? right? So we want baby to come this way. If the baby's coming into the pelvis this way, right, it's a pretty wide angle. So we like to get baby's chin tucked towards their chest. And this is a much smaller diameter to travel through the pelvis. So this would be the most ideal position for baby to get into the pelvis. What we'll sometimes see is when the abdominal muscles are really weak or we have a really big separation, baby will sometimes, instead of being like a little bit more snug and closer into the body, they kind of end up a little bit more tilted because the abdominal muscles are so lax that it's like hanging out there, that baby's kind of hanging like that. This is not all the time. I'm talking about in extreme cases, but there can be different variations of this. So baby ends up on a tilt, and sometimes they end up with their chin extended, with their neck extended versus flexed. And what we can see is sometimes like we may not be dilating that much, or it might be really slow. Baby might have a hard time getting into the pelvis or through the pelvis. And also when the baby gets to certain parts of the pelvis and it hits certain muscles, it also sends signals to the body as well. So within the uterus, if we have tightness on one side, that can also, so actually this is perfect, right? So we have ligaments connecting the uterus inside here, right? When we're pregnant, our uterus really expands. Sometimes we have one side is tight and it pulls the uterus off to one side. And that also gets baby into a funky position. And sometimes either the baby can't travel through or has just a really difficult time. So when we're looking to make our births easier, right, we need to address these imbalances so we don't have babies getting into these funky positions. So we can make more space for baby to come through the pelvis. And what the other thing we'll commonly see is for people who are tucked a lot. So if you notice, when you're tucking this way, it creates more space at the top of the pelvis. So sometimes we'll see babies getting into funky positions because they think they have a ton of space. So we'll sometimes see, usually when a baby comes out, most ideal is you see the back of your head because that is the easiest way to navigate the pelvis. Sometimes there's something called having a posterior or sunny side up baby. That means when they come face up. Those labors often we have, you might have heard of back labor where it can be quite a bit intense on that lower back. It could be much longer pushing time. It could be really much harder. I've had clients who did it. But if we can avoid that, why not? So what we'll often see is with this tucked pelvis, we'll see this big diameter here, but then it comes time for baby to come out. And this is not a very easy space to navigate. We want to have the capability for this to nod backwards. So we're maximizing the outlet. The other thing is, remember I said this can come in and out a bit, right? So if this could come out a little bit and this can come out, not necessarily as much as I'm doing it right now, you're now maximizing that outlet. So this is the inlet, right? And this is the outlet. In early labor, right? Perhaps we want to maybe maximize a little bit of the space up here for baby to get into. But at the end, we need to be able to untuck and let these bones move in order for baby to come out. So when we're talking about our core and our pelvic floor and their function, it's not just what you're doing now is going to affect you right now and how you're breathing and whether you can connect with your core. It can affect your whole birth and how that birth goes. I tell anyone who's had any sort of, if you have chronic constipation, hemorrhoids, you have pain with sex, or you're having issues with being able to orgasm, I'm like, go to a pelvic floor therapist before you even give birth. Let's see if maybe we need to release those muscles. Sometimes when women give birth and they tear, when the tissue heals, actually what sometimes happens is it kind of pulls on the other muscles surrounding it, and the muscles actually can end up tight. So I'll tell you, if you've torn in the past, if you've had a C-section, we might need to do some scar tissue mobilization to make sure those muscles didn't tighten up, because when baby needs to come through, right, we need those muscles to soften. We need them to yield to baby. And I've seen the biggest difference for VBAC clients. I've worked with clients, so as I mentioned, I'm a birth doula. What I've done is I've taken this work and I've started using it with all my birth clients, and I've had phenomenal results from people who had 3-day, 4-day births going to 7-hour births, 9-hour births the second time or third time around, or even less than that. And a lot of what that was is that we took time either before they got pregnant or during their pregnancy even, so it's never too late. And we worked on being able to move the pelvis. We worked on, can we get more mobility in that tissue? Can we build more strength so that we can maximize the space for baby? The last thing I would say is when it comes to childbirth is that sometimes afterwards, we can find those things like I was saying, like with the prolapse, we might suddenly see that. We might suddenly see this diastasis recti or diastasis recti. No one can agree on how to pronounce it. We often say DR for short, right? That's the separation of the abdominal muscles. And some people, they'll just feel really weak, have lower back pain, something feels off. Maybe they feel during the pregnancy, some people will have symphysis pubis dysfunction, and that's when there's excessive tucking and there's kind of a little bit of a separation here, and it's really uncomfortable. So what I would say is work on your body before you have kids even. Work on getting your muscles, your pelvic floor to coordinate well so you can hopefully avoid some of these issues and maximize your body's function. But also know after you give birth, your body's just gone through this amazing, wondrous thing, and it needs time to heal. And it needs time to come back. And it's the time to rest, and it's the time to accept help so that your tissues can slowly, slowly heal, come back to where they need to. What I want you to be aware of is that after you give birth, and even during your pregnancy, there shouldn't be pain with sex. There shouldn't be leaking urine or feces or even gas, right? All these things are signs that something's off with that system. We actually sometimes see people have excessive vomiting or hyperemesis gravidarum. There's a lot of causes to that. And I'm not going to get into all the other causes, but what we'll see is with people who have very tight pelvic floors and there's a mismanagement of the pressure, they'll actually have it even more so. Because remember, when we add pressure to the system, when you put in one place, it redistributes to another place. So if you already, let's say, have a tight pelvic floor, and let's say you have really taut abs, and now you're adding a baby to that mix, so now there's even more pressure. It can put this lot of upward pressure, and you can have more indigestion, more vomiting, more nausea. So there's other reasons, hormonal, a million other things going on. But why should we add to it? If we can alleviate some of these things, right? We don't want to be having, again, any of those things that I mentioned. We need to get on top of it today. You need to start becoming more aware of your body, start integrating how you're breathing, how you're engaging your core, how you're moving, so that you can function and feel good in your body and hopefully have better pregnancies, better births, better intimacy, and amazing pelvic floor health. So I want to thank you so much. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, I'm wondering. I wonder if it just has anything to do with my second pregnancy. After kids, with my second pregnancy, my baby was very, very low the entire time.
Okay.
I just don't know. I was telling the midwife, and I don't know what they say, whatever. But like, they give excuses.
I'm going to repeat that. So someone was asking about their baby being super duper low, and they asked their midwife about it, and they didn't really get an answer. It sounds like. Or you were told it was normal?
Yeah, basically like no one answered, oh, babies are positioned.
Right.
Something else, I don't know.
Okay, so I'm very curious how low you were, because there's something known as a pendulous belly. And what that is when there's a lot of laxity in the abdomen and the muscles, and actually the belly gets lower than the pubic bone. So was it like really pointy and low? Because I carried low and I had no issues, but there's carrying low, but there's also what the abdomen was doing. So with a pendulous belly, the baby's too low because there's too much, again, laxity in the abdomen. And we'll sometimes also see babies get into funky positions as a result. There are things to do for that. So having baby sitting low isn't automatically something wrong or automatically something to be concerned for, because we all have different torso lengths. We all have different bodies, so we might be carrying differently. So I couldn't say without seeing you, right?
But I felt like it didn't make sense.
Something felt off, right? Yeah. So that right there, when something feels off, you're right about it. And it's good to follow your instinct. So with this work, what I found is a lot of doctors and midwives, unfortunately, are not trained in core and pelvic floor health. They're trained in reproductive health. And there's actually a difference. So a lot of people, they'll have an issue and they're like, okay, I'm going to go to my doctor because, it's in this area. So it must mean they're going to be able to help me with that. And what we have is we have a lot of old school advice. So the old school advice for everything was just do a bunch of Kegels, which even though we went over how to connect with our pelvic floor today, not everybody should be doing Kegels for the same reason I explained earlier, is that for some people, if they're already super tight, you should not be trying to come here. You need to be letting go. So I find that with that advice, I find that with a lot of things being brushed off, like, oh, that's normal. Like I have a number of clients who have something known as the symphysis pubis dysfunction, which I mentioned was, I just need to take a drink, which is basically that separation. It can be really painful. There can be pain from here and it kind of emanates into the groin, sometimes down the inner thigh. People will usually feel it like when they're rolling out of bed and stuff like that. And I've had where practitioners were like, oh, no, it's normal. Oh, no, that's fine for pregnancy. And it's like, well, no, it's not. And usually that's a dysfunction in the muscular aspect, as well as what's happening with those bones. And there are a number of ways we can be helping ourselves that we can either eliminate or bring down that pain at least somewhat. I've had clients who completely got rid of it during their pregnancy. One of my clients, she had her first 3 pregnancies. She had it all. And like, she finally came to do work because she didn't know there was something she could do about it. So I think that's the importance of this work and having conversations, is that recognizing that there are places we can go for answers. There are pelvic floor therapists, and they're amazing for this work. There are a pelvic floor therapist. And so I'm not a pelvic floor therapist. I'm a movement specialist in core and pelvic floor.
So for someone like me, who would you recommend? Someone like
So
you,
yes, yes,
or like a pelvic floor?
yes, both. So I have a lot of clients who come to me who see amazing results. When it comes, one of the biggest differences is I don't do internal work. So when there's something dysfunctional internal, and even through discussion and us trying to work on it, they're still having a hard time, I'm going to send them to a pelvic floor therapist. So I have some people who they come to me and they only use me and they see amazing progress and it's fabulous. And then I have people who come in like, it's a better fit to go to pelvic floor therapist for what they need. And then I have a lot of people who do both. They'll work with both me and a pelvic floor therapist. So what I'm doing is I'm refining a lot of the movements. I'm looking at your whole body mechanics, because sometimes what happens is that some pelvic floor therapists have more time than others to get into refining all these movements, and some don't have as much time. So they might be sometimes telling you things to do, but not breaking down how to do them. So yes, I'm going to get to that in a second. You can say it if it's relevant to what I'm saying right now. Okay, sure. So a lot of what I'm doing is I'm refining it. I'm looking at your body mechanics and making sure everything's aligned so you can access those muscles well, right? Because if like we're off on the things that are connecting to those muscles, we're gonna have a hard time connecting to those muscles. So we need to make sure our foundation is stable. So I do a lot of that work, and again, it's so individual for the person, but I have a ton of people who come to me and thankfully have had success. And as a birth doula, I tend to work a lot with prenatal and postnatal. So that's like an area of expertise when it comes to me, because I happen to be, I have a foot in both worlds, which is absolutely phenomenal, because I don't think enough people get to see that. And I get to see how things translate to birth. And that's why I've taken all the things I've known and I started implementing them with my birth clients. And that's where I've seen the changes, because I've been able to like go to them in labor. And like, I had a client, for example, one of the clients who had a 3-day birth the first time. And when it came around to the second time, I said, okay, we're going to have sessions in advance. We're going to go over how to untuck and tuck the pelvis, because I saw she had a hard time untucking. And what we did was, when she was in labor, I noticed that like her feet were externally rotated. She was tucked. She was pressing forward here. Every time I saw her do that, I had her turn her feet forward. I backed her hips up because she was putting a lot of weight forward. The second I did that, she was like, oh my God, I can feel the pressure shifting to my cervix, and I feel it, the contractions more effectively. And she had a really short birth. And the other thing that happened with her birth is that it came to the end and baby came out. And because we had worked together in advance, she understood the language. So it wasn't me trying to teach something to her in the process of going through labor, of going through this. Suddenly, oh, now I should teach you how to like do this thing. So baby's head came out, but not the rest of the baby's body. And it just wasn't coming out. So I just said to her, I'm like, untuck your pelvis, lift your tail up to the ceiling. And the second she did that, the baby just slid right out. So having worked in advance, like I get to see this, and not just her, I've had numerous clients since then. I got to see it in practice. And it's the most amazing thing, because we get like a basic foundation as doulas, but if we can add this element, a lot of people know about spinning babies. Has anyone here heard about spinning babies? Most people not, right? Because for those of you who haven't given birth, maybe not. Some of you I saw raise your hands. So spinning babies are techniques you can use in the moment when you're in labor, and maybe at the end of your pregnancy before, There are some things you can do earlier, but it's when babies are in funky positions to get them into better positions. They also have several moves to do, just in general, to get your body more prepared and get baby into a great position. So most people go to that when they're ready, like, oh, baby's breaching, now I'm going to start to do that. Oh my gosh, I'm having a log labor, now I'm going to do it. Spinning babies is phenomenal. I love it. My goal though is if we can get you to a point where you don't even need that, or if you need that, your body has the capability to go there. Because if you come into birth and you don't realize that you've never relaxed your pelvic floor in your life, right? And now suddenly you're being asked to do something you don't know what to do, or you're trying to get your, let's say we're trying to tuck your pelvis because baby's in a funky position and we want to reposition, right? If you can't do that effectively, it's gonna be really hard. So can we get to a point where we can work on these things in advance so that when you get to it, you have the capability to do it? And you're not learning it when you're middle of having contractions and a baby coming out of you, or at the end of your pregnancy, but it's also never too late. So I tell people, totally, go do the spinning babies. Do these things later in your pregnancy if you haven't learned about it earlier, but start the work now. After you have your baby, continue the work, because guess what? These things affect us not just now, but down the road. So when we go through menopause, our hormones change, and even after we have babies, our hormones change. And hormonal changes can affect our muscles, it can affect our ligaments, it can affect our pelvic organs. So we wanna make sure that this is information that we can be using to help us not just now, not just when we're having babies, not just right when we're done, but like for the rest of our lives. This is going to affect us, gonna affect us when you're aging and you're older, right? We hear of a lot of people, not having bowel function, or urinary continence. And actually, it's not necessarily considered normal in other places for that to automatically happen. So we'll see other areas of the world where we're not having these high rates of incontinence as we age or after we give birth. And we're like, what's the difference? It's partially our expectations, what we think is normal or not. What is happening in those places that it's not happening? And very often they're more active, they're moving around more, they're practicing some of these things way earlier. So the key is to nip things in the bud. Do preventative work, but also the second you start to experience something, take care of it right away. 1 second, you had something you want, yeah.
Do you have recommended pelvic floor benefits?
Yes, so if you see here, I have some papers from the functional pelvis. By the way, some of these are self-assessment. It's for everyone to take, so feel free. I have from the functional pelvis. Right now, Lindsay is not in America for the year, but she has her wonderful, wonderful coworker, Sonia Ryder. She's in Brooklyn. I highly recommend her. She comes to your house. They are on the higher end, but so phenomenal that I really highly recommend them. There's also some people in the city, Rachel Parada. So here's the thing with pelvic floor therapy. Insurances don't like to pay for pelvic floor therapy. When they do pay, they pay so little that it's not worth it for most pelvic floor therapists to accept insurance.
Why don't they like to pay? Because then if you get that.
So if you have out-of-network benefits, most insurances will pay $35 to $65. That's the amount they'll reimburse. If you have out-of-network benefits. If you don't have out-of-network benefits, they may not reimburse anything, or it might be even less. It's very, very little. So bureaucratic, sexist, we can get, it's the system. It's our system we're in, right? So if a man would need Viagra, they'll be like, sure, we'll pay for that. We'll cover that. Right. A woman is having dysfunction in her body. And I think part of that is because people think sexual dysfunction is not something important enough, but I think a lot of people don't realize how much that manifests into other areas of our life. And then we have people who are not getting the help they need, and then they're ending up having surgeries. And actually a lot of the surgeries to correct a number of these issues have high failure rates. So what's happening is you can be just paying for the physical therapy and people can actually be improving and getting better. But that's not happening. They think they're saving money, but then they end up spending thousands and thousands of dollars on these surgeries. And then people end up needing multiple surgeries because that surgery fails and that surgery. There are some people who have success, and there are some people it's definitely the right thing for them. But for a lot of people, that's not the case.
Is it connected also to endometriosis and all?
Yes. So that's why I mentioned very, I briefly said that our periods, right? 100% what's happening with those pelvic floor muscles can affect our organs, because what happens is when the muscles aren't working the way they should, there's constriction in terms of blood flow, right? So we're not getting the maximum amount of blood coming to the tissues. There's still going to be blood there, right? Because if there's no blood going, tissue's going to die off. We're going to have these issues. But it's like any part of the body where there's like kind of stagnation for whatever reason, that can happen with the pelvic floor. And what that does is it affects the organs. What it also does is if you have muscles that are really tight and they're compressing organs, it's going to affect the function of those organs. So what we'll commonly see, for example, with people with that abdominal separation, we'll see a lot of digestive issues. And people don't realize that it's connected. So they're like going to the gastroenterologist, they're going here and they're maybe getting a little bit better. And suddenly they have these allergies or these intolerances that they never had before. And what it is you had support to help your system work the way it should be working. Now it's lost that support. And it's this domino effect happening. So we'll see that manifest in multiple ways in the same thing, like people who are having like really intense period. But when it comes to endometriosis, it's also like what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? Where the pelvic floor muscle is super tight and that wasn't, and that led to it. Was it the other way around? You know, sometimes we don't always know the answers for sure, but what we can do is we can see what's in front of us and we can now assess that and we can tackle what we're seeing and address it.
Have you heard of the Women's Therapy Center in Long Island?
I know names better than.
Rachel, I just forgot their names. Okay.
Do you know where?
Dita and someone else. They like wrote a book on private pain, all about dyspareunia and.
Okay. So I heard of that name. I didn't read the book.
Okay.
I can definitely give some
I
recommendations.
went there and I was like wondering if it's like you knew about it.
There are definitely people near me who I would recommend and some people I won't. And what I would say is that for anything in life, it's really, really important that you do your research because not all practitioners are created equal. So I have sometimes be like, oh, my pelvic therapist was wonderful. And then I ask them questions and they're like, you know, or my hospital experience was wonderful. And then, and I loved my doctor. My doctor was the most amazing. And then I asked specific questions and it wasn't. They had a pretty room, right? Right? So everything's subjective and you have to know context and you have to know who you're speaking to and what they're speaking to. So when it comes to pelvic floor therapists, we have, unfortunately, a number of pelvic floor therapists who were trained old school, which was any problem you have is solved by doing Kegels, right? And then we'll have people who are like, let's say really tight and they're like worsening their symptoms or not getting better. And when you're going to a pelvic floor therapist and you're having that issue, again, like I said earlier, we're not just looking at the pelvic floor. I need to be looking what's happening in your upper body. Are your shoulders functioning the way they should be? Are your glutes functioning? Your feet? We need to look at the whole thing. So I'll sometimes have people who are like given false information or false hope, or not even false hope. They're like given information based on old information because that therapist didn't have the experience of helping someone in that way, or isn't up to date with their research. So it's really important to kind of vet the sources and ask them questions. Oh, right. When were you trained? And it could be that someone was trained recently, but the person who trained them was more old school. So you want to ask questions. How do you tend to treat your patients? What do you usually recommend? What happens in a session, right? And you just start to ask questions and get a sense of whether they're a good fit for you or not.
Now,
Sure.
What's the difference between like a YouTube video practicing like the pelvic floor muscles to find a good trainer online or seeing a therapist?
So there's 1,000,001 videos out there. I am a big fan as a Restore Your Core teacher of Restore Your Core. It is an online program and it's phenomenal. And the reason I'm a big fan of it is because I did years of research and she's aligned the most with all I found to work. And she's actually had a lot of success. Also, her work is so similar to all the up-to-date pelvic floor therapists. So she has the most up-to-date information. She's like Lauren O'Han, she's a creator. She's beyond, Restore Your Core. Lauren O'Han. So she is like beyond the times. She took information from everywhere, culminated it all together, put together this program, and found ways that really work, focusing on those biomechanics, retraining the muscles to work correctly. So her program, I love it. And some people do very well with online programs. Some people don't. So I'll have people who they're like, nope, I do not want to come into in-person class. And if I do come in, I'm only coming for private because it's just not me. And I have other people who are like, no, I'd like to be at my home. I like to do this every day at this time. I don't need anybody else. Right. So each person's different. And what? It's online. And if you go on Facebook, there's a free community group. You don't have to buy the program to join. Ooh, actually this Black Friday now. So they're actually going to have a sale. And if you message me, I will send you a coupon for $10. Yes, so actually, yes, I have a card. So I actually come now into Crown Heights once a week on Mondays. And I do classes now in Crown Heights. I do restore in people's homes.
Oh,
Yeah, so I have somebody who like chooses to host, and we have a number of people there. So I right now have a level 1 Restore Core, level 2 Restore Core, and I just started a prenatal as well. So I'm here Mondays, and then the rest of the time I'm in Frockway, which is where I live. So what? I'm always happy to start new classes. Right. Yeah, we can do it. So I have 2 weeks left to the current ones. So when those 2 weeks are over, I'm starting new ones in those time slots. So I have like a 9:40 a.m. and I have an 11 a.m. and I have a 12:45 is the prenatal. So the prenatal I just started, and it's like no space in there. It's like packed. I'm happy to do a class. I happen to have a private this week right after, but I'm happy to put together another class after or before that time. So I'm totally fine. I know time-wise for some people it's hard if you have kids, right? But we go over all this. We learn, we integrate. It's in like a yoga Pilates style. So accessible. But my goal is with these classes, you should come and you should learn about your body. You should learn how to get that proper alignment, proper engagement. But you should be able to take that information and not just do it when you're in class, but eventually take it into every day-to-day life, right? So when you go to pick up your baby or your toddler, you're using proper core engagement to do that. You're not going to move like a robot, right? So that's not our goal, but it's to move in a way that's going to support your organs, that's going to support your pelvic floor and your core, because it's going to impact you for the rest of your life. So I do have a lot of clients who stay with me a lot longer, but my goal is for you not to stay with me forever. I want you to grow. I want you to keep moving forward and be able to go to anything and understand your body. Like, oh, that wasn't okay for my core. I need to modify that move. I can't go as much. Oh, I'm not yet ready to run 5 miles. I'm going to run a few blocks to start.
How can we register to your,
so I have cards here. You can, yes, you can text me, you can message me, email me. I'm very responsive. I'm very happy to answer questions. And yeah, you can definitely do it that way. And whenever I get enough people, I'm always happy to do another class, and I do privates as well. I just wanted to get to you because I saw you raising your hand before, and I want to make sure I answer your question.
I imagine to the general public of women here, people that don't focus on this and don't know about it and don't work on it aren't perfect and probably aren't where they should be. But at what point would you say is it a concern for them to actually spend time researching and looking into and working on? Because there's so many things to always work on professional bodies.
100%. So number one, this is a process, and there's layers to it. So you're not going to possibly get to everything in your body in one shot, which is why I said even for myself, right? I was working on my breathing pattern and I was able to get it, but I wasn't able to make it, like it took me several years to get to that point. So not overwhelming yourself, first of all, but if you have symptoms that are interfering with day-to-day life, that are worrisome, get it checked out, right? So you're feeling that weakness, you're feeling heaviness, you're having those crampy periods, you're having pain with intercourse. It doesn't have to be you have all these symptoms, because not everyone has all these symptoms. You might have 1 or 2. You know, it's enough that something feels off in your body and you feel, let's say you have a kid and you're like, I feel a difference now. I didn't feel this before. Or intimacy doesn't feel the same. Something feels different, right? So anything that feels off, let's get it checked out. Let's see what's going on.
A lot of people just tell me things like, oh, just wait till you have kids. Like everything's just going to go downhill in every way. You can never
No. I'm like,
every time I say anything's good for him, it's like, oh, just wait till you have kids. Like this is going to go bad, this is going to go bad. And, like,
right. Please don't wait till you have kids.
Like, everyone I talk to.
But that's like saying,
Call me more often.
Okay. When I hear like something's good, I'm like, wow, okay.
right. It's like, oh, you're probably going to break your leg anyways. So why don't you go and like do something really dangerous where you're probably going to break it? Like that doesn't make any sense.
Just be, destroyed and
Right. So I don't like that, because even though I had prolapse, by the way, I had 2 home births. I had 2 water births. I didn't have any stitches. Okay. I had beautiful recoveries, which again, I believe I had the prolapse before I ever had kids. And most people are like, what? Right. So because I was super educated, I happen to be super lucky. So even though I didn't know much about prolapse, because I knew about physiological birth, I did things for my body and I birthed in a way that actually protected myself. So unfortunately, also, I have a lot of people come to me once they have issues, and I'm like, and I take a full history because I want to go back. Let's see what's really going on in the body. Were there signs? Were there things going on? Most often, there were a ton of signs, and they were ignored. They were pushed aside. They didn't know there was something wrong. And what I've met is people who, when things do get bad and they are filled with regret, they're like, if I would have known, I would have taken care of this. I would have done things differently. So for me, if you're experiencing things now, like saying like, oh, well, they're going to get worse anyways, like, no, well, you can prevent it from getting worse, right? You can make it better now. Life can be even better than it was before. I have more control over my pelvic floor now than I did years ago.
But sometimes I think it can also be like emotional, like I had lower back pain. I guess my, I don't know, like the S shape more. So
right.
Basically, and then I did something called cranio.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of craniosacral therapy.
And it took away it literally went away.
But that's also physical. Yeah. So you might notice, right? So you can stop me whenever you need to, by the way. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So, what if I just take the
Take it. If you have more questions, I'm happy to stay afterwards and answer some questions.
Okay, so I want to thank everybody for coming. We'll get there. I want to thank everyone for coming, and on behalf of all of us, we have a little gift. So thank you very much for joining us. We really, really appreciate it. I also want to say that Baruch Hashem, Malka just gave us some incredible next steps who we can turn to. Mikvah.org has a beautiful referral website, and they do have pelvic floor therapists there. That said, I agree with Malka. You should ask them those questions. Ask them, what is their approach? I have met some of them as a trained Kala teacher. Some of them came to speak for us about, that's one of the reasons I know a lot about this topic. And they're great resources. So go on mikvah.org. There's the referral list, and those are another set.
Also, people reach out to me all the time asking me. You're more than welcome to reach out to me, and I'm happy to refer because I network actually with pelvic floor therapists. We have study groups. We connect with each other. So I do know of pelvic floor therapists, but I'm most likely referring to people who I know are good at what they're doing, and I've known people to have success with them. So it might not be as big of a pool, or I might have heard of some people, but I'm going to recommend the people who I know people have had great success with and are at the top of their game.
That's amazing. So thank you very much. Now we're all going to join together for our incredible photo. Everybody smile. And next week we are, Mitzvah Hashem, having Sarah Chana Silverstein come back again. She will be speaking about postpartum and nursing. Sorry, we've had her twice. I'm like, which one? Postpartum and nursing. So everybody's welcome next week, Wednesday night, same time. And smile, everybody.
Do you mind if I switch and I'll go on that side?
I don't know where you want.
If you want to come in with us.
I don't want to block anybody.
Everybody in?
How about you?
Oh, I'm not in. Hello. 1, 2, 3, smile. One more. 1, 2, 3, smile. And one last one. 1, 2, 3, smile. Yay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Pleasure. Thank you. Oh, here, let's pass these around. You want to come? There's papers. Take one and pass. Take and pass.
This afternoon, what time is it afternoon?
Take and yeah. Take and
So that would
pass.
depend if there's enough people interested, and if I have enough people between
Okay, and then Malka's
finishing
card.
early
I'm
afternoon
sending in a
and
few
later today,
different.
then I'm happy to do it.
Take and pass. Pass.
Yeah, I need at least 6 people. 6 to 7 people. So when someone's interested, when someone's interested, what I do is like, I'll be like, okay, I send it to a few people. I don't have connections